Well, hello everybody. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful May the 10th. I hope everybody's having a good time all over the world. We have a lot of people coming from Netherlands, Brazil, and just about over the world. So I hope you're having a good time and staying safe as we are slowly but surely exiting from this COVID period of our lives. Today we are going to have a panel of people going to be joining us. So I'm going to go through very quickly the housekeeping. This is, of course, as always, presented by Slalom and Precocity, who have been sponsoring us for almost 2 years now, actually over 2 years, I think. So thank you very much for enabling us, for being able to bring the service design content all over the world. So thank you so much to our sponsors. As always, this is a Service Design Network Dallas chapter. So I am Greg Lacloufie, and this is Brandon Ward and Robin Roberts and Brenda Plink. And we are very glad to have you with us today. Very quickly, as you know, this is being recorded, and you can probably find a recording of this session tonight or tomorrow. But if you actually want to go back and look at the 20-something previous sessions we've had, definitely go and visit our YouTube channel, and you can definitely see some of those pre-recording. As always, a quick little note. If you actually want to be asking a question to one of our panelists, just go into the Zoom chat and just type the question. I would like to know this, but make sure it's obviously a question for the panel. There is quite a bit of engagement, very high engagement in the chat. We absolutely love the fact you are talking to each other during the whole session. It's wonderful. But if you actually have a specific question, make sure it stands out so we actually catch it and ask the panel afterward. Today, we're going to be talking about something that we've been kind of like towing around over the past 2 years as it comes back over and over about the outcome, the business outcome, and the ROI of service design. We have decided to tackle this a bit harder this time, and actually have with us some people actually do deal with both business and service design and explain us what the relationship is between design and business and how can you make it better. We hear a lot of like friction between business and design, and we're going to show you that it doesn't have to be. And there is definitely a very big outcome of service design when it comes down to impacting business. So that's going to be our topic today. Not as glamorous as usual, but very crucial, very critical for a lot of the work we do. So a couple of years ago, we had Mark Stick down over here, and we actually asked him this question and say, you can't calculate the ROI of service design, just like you can't calculate the ROI of marketing as a whole. It's a very good point. You can't really just say like, what is service design impacting our business? It's just very hard to quantify and qualify. What we can do though, is actually apply intentional metrics to specific outcomes of individual service design projects. And then you can measure the impact on business. That is something we do all the time. And I'm going to show you a case study that I personally done a couple of years ago. Everything can be measured, whether you're trying to measure the service length of a customer service call, for example, or the call center volume, saving time. If you can reduce the time of some employees to do the same task for like, let's say 5 minutes less every day, you can measure a lot of things. So don't let people tell you like, no, something's cannot be measured yet. There's always a way of measuring stuff. You have to be thinking creatively about how you can actually kind of like bookend something that can be measured and then therefore be brought to business. So I'm going to talk about one my team has worked on a couple of years ago in a major US telecom. It was a service design project. I'm going to go through the very basic phases and what the outcome was for business. And then after that, we're going to introduce you to the panel. So this particular case study was around, the discovery was around stakeholder interviews, blueprinting, customer journey, user journey, strategic foresight, personas, the whole thing, right? After 6 weeks, we were able to bring business, valuable insights on what we had found out, also validation of things that they actually were like thinking were wrong or broken, but actually not had data to back that up. They had a better understanding of what the problem was and the problem areas were, and they actually get a very clear idea of what to be done next. So those are the very business outcomes that are kind of hard to measure at this point because they're kind of like soft and contextual, but it's very crucial for business to understand what's happening and what needs to be fixed very early in the process. The second step in this particular case, we actually went back to business with like 4 main problem areas we found out. Those 4 main problem areas led to 16 identified problem spaces, and those were clearly identified. And those led to 43 individual recommendations for in business. So again, as a business lead, you now have a very clear idea what's happening. You also have confidence to actually just go and shop for budget, for example, or increase the bandwidth or hire resources. And you also have a roadmap that's going to allow you to do what's going to be done next 6 weeks, 6 months, 6 years, right? So this is a really huge business outcome that Redesign provides very early on in the process. The next step was to actually provide business with the results. So we actually took those 43 recommendations and we definitely highlighted them and put them in order. We prioritized them in terms of like what to do first based on complexity and business impact. And we provided that so they actually understand their options. They could also prioritize and they could also align internally, because out of 14 stakeholders, now they were no longer working in individual units, they were working as a whole, very holistically, being able to tackle the same problem for 14 different lenses, which provided great alignment for business. The very next step was in a true design project to doing the ideation, prototyping, validation, iteration, implementation, delivery. So again, very collaborative work. The business was able to see the possibilities. They were able to get clarity on what could be done in a very safe environment. They were able to understand what was happening as a prototype without spending a lot of time and effort and resource investment. And also, again, get alignment onto what we'll be doing for each line of businesses, each stakeholders, each units. It was very useful for them to understand what was going to be happening for them. Even as simple in terms of like budget and resources, they know, okay, we're going to need to be spending $600,000 over the next 6 weeks on this particular pain point. Those are things they didn't know before we actually just came in and actually did this job for them. The overall outcome was to give business confidence. Now, after 6, 8, 12 weeks, they knew exactly what was broken, what the friction points were, and they were able to kind of like have a plan to fixing this first, then this, then that. Versus trying to fix, we always use the metaphor of the finger in the dam, instead of actually to be able to band-aid some problems, not actually a holistic understanding of what's happening. And it could be internal, it could be external, it could be the retail business, it could be the sales staff, it could be a lot of different permutation of solutions. And that was a major business outcome for them. They now were able to understand very clearly what needs to be done and put in place a roadmap to fix those problems. So the idea here is that design and business equals success. And we're going to be discussing this over the next hour or so with our panel, because we always hear some friction between those two entities, but it doesn't have to be. So I would like for you to welcome our panel. So Jennifer Bernati-Felix is the Director of Design Strategy at Chick-fil-A in Atlanta, Georgia. Brian Sullivan is the Director of Design Strategy at Sabre in Dallas, Texas. And Vinay Agrawal is the VP Head of Product at On Point in Dallas, Texas. And Vinay will do us the honor of representing business today as a friend. And I'm going to give each of you a couple of minutes to introduce yourself. Jennifer.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me here today. You did a great job of introducing me. So I've been with Chick-fil-A for 2 years. Before that, I was at Blue Cross. I've worked in CPG, service design, digital design, but really excited to talk about this topic. It's definitely a passion of mine of bringing design and business together. As we were setting up technology, I was just telling the guys here that really this topic is what inspired me to go back to school after getting my design degree and getting my MBA, because it was such a hot topic. So excited to chat here with these great brains. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Jennifer. Brian, do you want to go next?
Sure. Thanks for having me. My name is Brian Sullivan. I am the Director of User Research, Digital Accessibility, and Design Strategy. When we think of design strategy at Sabre, we tend to lump it into two categories. There's product design thinking and service design thinking. I also teach at Southern Methodist University. Brandon's part of that program. He teaches the service design class there. I teach also in the graduate program at UNT, and I teach 2 classes, surprise, surprise, product design thinking in the fall, service design thinking in the spring. I'm going to share with you a recent case study that we had our students work on for building an exhibit for NASA that we're looking at putting in the Smithsonian Museum. So I'll be talking about that a little bit today. and I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Brian. And last but not least, Vinay Agrawal, welcome.
Thank you. It's strange to be the business voice. I'm so used to being in the business, but also always trying to tout the benefits of using design and research. So I've gotten so used to kind of being the voice of UX as opposed to the voice of business. So it's a little mental shift for me here today. So I've been at OnPoint, which is a Coke Industries business, for about 9 months. Prior to that, I'd spent about 10 years in financial services with JP Morgan Chase, Capital One, a few other banks doing product management, operations, strategy, those kinds of things. Broader background in operations and supply chain and consulting. So I think that's probably where my business credentials come from. Very much a proponent of everything that you do with and for customers or users delivers an experience. Whether you choose to design it or not, you're still delivering an experience. And so I think the more that you can make that an explicit choice, the better it is. And I think that's what we'll kind of delve into through the conversation today. So back over to you, Greg.
Thank you, Vinay. I have to, ethically speaking, I have to say, Vinay and I were both working together at JP Morgan Chase, and he was my peer on the business side, and we had a very successful relationship. So it does work. When business understands design and understands business, it does work very well. So now we are going to dive into the question, if you don't mind. So we hear two stories. Design and business are playing very nice together. As I was saying, Vinay and I would play very nice together, I hope. And then we hear that business and business are not playing nice together. So let me just ask you the panel, how did you make yours a success story? Let's start with Jennifer, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So, going back to the start of my career, I'd say maybe we weren't playing so nice together. It was some of that stumbling of, what is the ROI? Why are we, putting so much effort into the aesthetic of this product when, it needs to function? That was back in my industrial design focused days. And over the years have learned really to partner with our business partners, to learn to speak their language. I think a big piece of that is putting on our design research hats as we talk to our business partners and partners, all of our stakeholders, and really thinking about how we can be empathetic and understand what their goals are, what their challenges are, and not, get too stuck in our own goals and challenges, right? So the same way that we want to understand and delve deep into our end users' concerns and priorities, to really take that approach with our stakeholders and just be open and listen and ask those questions so that we can work collaboratively to come to an end solution. I think that collaboration piece is key too. The way I think of service design in general, is that it's really a mindset, and to speak of it and to think of it that way versus here is the end solution that we're going to deliver, has really helped me bring my partners along with me to help show, hey, this is how we're thinking about it, by putting the end user at the center of what we're doing. And ultimately, through our research, through our data, whether it's qual, whether it's quant, whether it's customer satisfaction, whether it is true financial ROI, we're able to see those results. So thinking of it as a mindset and trying to help others really understand that mindset and come along that journey with us to create those solutions, and really to be empathetic to what our partners are thinking about, and kind of get out of our own head. Again, just like with our users, we're not our partners. We all come at it from a different angle. That's what makes us stronger.
Cool. So if you don't mind, Vin, I'm going to go back to you every single time to make sure that we have it right and you agree or disagree. And then we just kind of use you as the kind of like the business counterpoint. So what do you think about what Jennifer just said there? Do you agree, disagree?
Definitely agree. I mean, look, everybody, whether you're talking about business and design or engineering or finance or sales, everybody has their own kind of objectives. And if you aren't able to align, you're always going to be at odds, right? So, I view it as the times where where it works well, you're able to come to a good understanding and alignment as to what your end goals are and the part each plays in achieving those. Where it doesn't work well, you're not really bought in. You may go through the motions, but the actions that each party takes or each part of the business takes show that you're not aligned and you're working at odds.
Yeah, very good. So Brian, let's go back to you. So you obviously have a very good relationship with business. Sabre is a huge company. So tell us, how is your relationship with business good, and why is it good? And maybe ask Vinay if you can lay on that.
Yeah, I think that for me, I go back to, there's a book by Jesse James Garrett called The Elements of User Experience, where he talks about there are 5 layers to user experience. And the foundational layer is the strategy layer. There's strategy, scoping, skeleton, and then surface, I think, is the top one. At the strategy level, he talks about the friction points that you're mentioning. So on one side, you have business outcomes, and then on the other side, you have user outcomes. And there can be a natural friction there. And I think what people need to understand is that's okay, right? We also need to understand that there are user metrics and there are business metrics, as Jennifer was talking about. We can educate our partners on the user metrics. We also need to have that open mindset that Jennifer was talking about, and understanding how our business partners are measured, how they measure success. What does that look like? And it's okay if the business metrics don't necessarily match the user metrics. We just need to understand them. For a successful relationship to occur, there's probably going to have to be some education that we have to do on our part. There's some listening that we also have to do on our part. I think a lot of times we tend to talk about empathy, and we use a lot of design terms when we talk to our business partners, and that's not really good. It's good for educating them, but if you can almost have a decoder ring to where you can say, to feel empathy for our customers, we need to do that research. We need to listen to our customers. Wouldn't it be awesome if we could find out what your customers really want so that you can sell more products to them, right? Which is, to me, another way of saying empathy. So our job, a lot of times as strategists and designers, is to almost act like a decoder ring for the business side of the equation. And I also like to bring out the Design Value Index, which is a couple of years ago. There was a pretty big study that looked at the top companies in the world, and the top companies in the world produced they had a higher return on investment, a higher ROI, almost 220% higher, that were design led. But that's where design and business have a really good relationship. And I think it does require a lot of nurturing, a lot of education, and a lot of trust. And I would say that it needs to be mutual trust, mutual respect. And if we can do that with our business partners, we're going to be a lot more successful, because we're going to get to talk to the people that we need, and we're going to be able to get to the research and the insights that we need. That's how I would answer that question.
Very good answer. So Vinay, we just heard a couple of times the word education, right? So do you feel like your business units, your PMs, your POs, your engineers, do you think that they are educated enough by designers to understand? Are we designers doing a poor job at educating them and bringing them on board and bringing that bridge to trust? Or is there still more work to be done there?
I'd say there's tremendous work to be done there. So I think, as ever, like, a good rule of thumb is always of understand and then seek to be understood. What I see most often is, no, like, you've got it wrong. Just listen to me. Like, I know the answer. It's like, it's kind of like you're talking to your teenagers, like, is that ever going to work? It doesn't work, right? But that's what I see over and over again. I also kind of, feel like part of, design or user experience, it can be kind of fluffy. It's kind of in there with strategy, and it's like, okay, great, I've heard this term, but what is it really going to do for me, and how long is it going to take? And so I think often when we talk about business outcomes, it's really kind of shorthand for how quickly can I get it? Is it going to be this week, this month, this quarter? And the reality is, good design and good user understanding and process flow, those things take time. Most businesses didn't get into the mess that they're in overnight, but they want to be able to fix it overnight. And that's really tough, right? And I think I'm guessing we'll get there at some point, but and you kind of alluded to your intro, is how do you prioritize, right? And so that's where working well together also means you don't necessarily go after, call it the biggest prize right away, but you do go after something that can help build a relationship more strongly right away. So go after the low-hanging fruit, go after something that's easy, somewhat obvious, but gives you a chance to work on the working styles and relationships, to where then you start tackling the tougher issues. You've got the personal trust between the people and the organizations and the different functions, to where you're going to make some missteps, but you're going to trust each other and to work through it.
Good. That's an excellent answer. It's a great segue to the next question, which is, as I was saying earlier, service design can leave business overwhelmed with a sheer amount of decisions to make, right? We talk about prioritization. What has worked well for your team? So instead of going back to business with like, there is 155 things I want you to fix tomorrow, how were you able to kind of like work with them, collaborate, kind of like, okay, how about we do those 5 first, then those 5, then those 5? Jennifer, what has been working for you?
Yeah, so I think, I found that in different organizations and different cultures, different things work better than others, right? But I think thinking back to the tools and methodologies within service design, if you think about like an impact cost matrix, for example, and you do this collaboratively again with your stakeholders, with your partners, and start to really map out, like this is super tactical, but mapping out some of those decisions, some of those options on impact, which, let's call that like the design pillar, and cost, let's call that the business pillar. And you're looking at these two priorities that the different parts of the business have, and helping to use those variables to pull out, okay, you know what, these ones are kind of pulling up to the top. We all agree that these are going to have the biggest impact for the lowest cost. Does that make sense? And sometimes there's a gut check that, maybe it doesn't have the best cost value, but it has this super crazy high impact. But that's where we can use our research and strategy to really align on that. So I go back to that idea of that thought sharing, that collaboration, and using the tools that we use in our design process to help bring our partners with us along the journey.
Yeah, perfect. Vinay, do you have any opinion? I mean, I know you and I have worked in very similar conditions. I know you agree, but can you tell us more about your point of view as far as business when you're being presented with like an overwhelming amount of possible solutions to fix one problem? How do you handle that?
One of the things I'd kind of say is separate out the what and the how, right? So the business is often worried about what are the outcomes I want, and design is often kind of the how am I going to get there. So as opposed to thinking that, I don't think people always keep it clear of the difference between those. So if I want to gain, X amount in revenue, great, but do you know how you're going to do it? No. Do some of your business people know? Not necessarily. Might your designers and UX organization that have insight into your users and customer segments, might they have? Sure, right? So, but how you go about getting to those gains is going to be different. And I think design has a lot to play in that. I'd almost just kind of say sometimes it's better to ask for forgiveness. Don't necessarily need to spell out every detail of every step of how you're going to go about doing it. It's just hold up your hand and say, yep, I got this, right? I'm going to go deliver on this methodology or deliver on this key objective. Once you do it, then people is like, wow, I wouldn't have thought you would get there. How'd you do it? That's your opportunity to start going back to that education process, showing that you can deliver the results. Then people are willing to listen to how you got there.
So, Vinay, is it fair to say, it's not fair to say, but is there a point where business doesn't care how you're gonna get there, right? So I know designers tend to be very like, nerdy about it. It's we're gonna be doing all those things, it's gonna be awesome, it's gonna be great. And business kind of like, I don't really understand what you're talking about. This is different language to me. Can you get there? Ultimately, that's all they care about. I know I'm being very like, dramatic here, but do you agree?
Yeah, because often what actually happens on the other side is you can spend a half hour talking about how you're going to go about doing that. But if I then ask you, so are you actually going to get the end results? Like, so how many customers am I going to gain? Oh, I don't know. Then why do I care about all this other stuff that you want to do if you can't actually deliver the results, or you don't see a path to getting there, right? So that's where it's like, yeah, you got to kind of be a little judicious in how much of the curtain you pull back on how you're doing it, and just stay focused on, here's the result we're going after, we're aligned on that, and I'm signing up to go deliver that with you.
So I see Brian is nodding heavily. So how have you been going about with kind of like dealing with the amount, the education? How do you navigate the threshold between too much information to business and not enough, to Vinay's point?
Yeah, it requires a lot of, I think there's the prioritization piece that Jennifer had just mentioned, which I think is super critical. The other thing is it depends on the type of project that you're doing. It goes back to those metrics. So if we're doing a service design project where we're trying to reduce the amount of time that it takes to do something, what you're really going to be looking at there is how do we optimize things? So it's optimization metrics. If you're doing something that's more of a transformation project, you're going to want to come down to, I call these statements impact statements or themes. And I usually phrase them as a who, what, wow. And the wow needs to have some type of a measurement behind it. And you might have looked at some type of a map, a journey map or a service design blueprint, and you're uncovering like a large amount of pain points or opportunities. Cluster those, and then when you cluster those into themes, try to put them into what I call who, what, wow statements. The wow is to the business, the wow is to the user. How are we going to get them to change the way that they're currently behaving? And you might think of a who, what, wow statement as a talking point. So pain point leads to talking points. Then if you include the other partner that we have in here is the tech side. So we got the business side, we got design, we need tech in there. Is this who, what, wow statement feasible? That gets into how do we do it? So I would include tech in the discussions to help kind of shrink that into the art of the possible. I also think that two other ways to prioritize beyond just getting it down to these who, what, wow statements and proof points would be, is it a no-brainer, a performance payoff, or a differentiator? You had a 2x2 grid earlier, Greg, in your presentation, which is essentially a very similar grid that I use. The other thing that I would add to that is time, right? So you talked about a roadmap, but what transformation projects take, really almost any project takes time, because we're asking people to change. It might take 2 or even 3 investment cycles for something to happen. So if we work with our business partners to say, what can we do now that are quick wins, no brainers, to start to build a little bit of momentum on whatever our project is. And then if we look at how much investment you need, what can we do to push off into that next investment cycle? So that's kind of how I would answer that. It's be sure to include your tech partners for what's feasible. Be able to shape these statements into, I call them who, what, wow statements. Prioritize in terms of no-brainers, performance payoffs, differentiators, and then think about time and investment cycles that the business might need to deliver those impacts. That's it.
Okay, very good. Now we've been talking a lot about very high level education and business relationship, but I'm going to ask you to provide one very, you don't have to name if you don't want to, but provide one very tactical example of when it was a really good success and it was a great return on investment through the relationship of design and business. Jennifer?
Yeah, I'll go back to my time at Blue Cross helping to run the C1 Innovation Lab, running that consulting group there. And, to be honest, we often had challenges of balancing, business and design was definitely a mystery. And so we worked a lot on that education piece that we talked about and found that in some cases we kind of needed some case studies to help us out. And so with one of our clients, there was a lot of, I'll say, questions from our business partners on the value we were adding relative to the time we were asking of our client team to go through this design sprint, to go through the process of design, to identify the root needs and solve for that and pilot that. But at the end of the day, what we heard from the client and what our business partners got to hear from the client was that it was so hugely valuable, that they learned so much about their employees who were our end users we were going after that they didn't know prior to this process. And it helped really open their mind to a different way of approaching how they were going to identify solutions and products and priorities for their customers. And it ended up being an internal business partner who kept coming back to us and asking like, hey, Jen, how can your team work with my other clients? Because this client wants to keep coming. Can they come back too? And, it was just such a wonderful example where we're able to completely shift that individual, that group's mindset based upon the outcomes, seeing the client's, eyes light up and, hearts open up as we went through those patient client experiences. It was just, it was powerful. And I want to kind of circle back to something that Vinay had said earlier around like the what and the how. That to me connects to also the why. And so in this case, in this specific case with the client, we were able to highlight why we were doing this and how important it was for their employees. And internally too, as we're trying to decide, make these decisions, going back to our why. I'll say Chick-fil-A is a great example of going back to our why as we're making decisions and prioritizing where we should really focus. Whether it's a business decision, a customer decision, where it's focused, going back to what the business stands for. So,
very good. So, a trick question for when you actually have a really good working relationship with like a business partner, and then you switch, you go to a different line of business or whatever, and you have not such a good relationship, do you kind of like, does it make it worse? Because it can be working well, right? So it's kind of like, don't you wish you could go back to the other business partner, actually understood it and make it work and was very fruitful?
I think it's fun. I think it's a fun challenge to take on, is to help teach people and kind of grow the knowledge and educate people around the value of the design mindset, of being able to kind of switch their mindset. They could be a complete naysayer at the beginning, or they could just, not be familiar with it. But again, just going in with that open mind and being able to share with them the value. And one way that I always love to do that is actually taking internal groups that may have no idea or maybe no connection to design, but taking miniature design sprints. It could be even just a few hours, but enough to help them see like, okay, I think I get it. In terms of, understanding what the root cause is, taking them through some of those, quick exercises. I like a challenge. So bring it on.
All right, very good. So, Vinay, same to you. Do you have a practical example of a time where business and design work well together? That was a huge return of investment. And let us know why this particular case is actually a very, very good relationship.
You know, it's interesting. Most of the time in my career, I've actually had very little explicit design support. Right. So while I've bought into design, so back to my intro, it's interesting for me to be the business voice here, because most of the time while I'm in a business role, I'm usually the voice of design thinking, UX, engage with customers, like slow down, figure out what we're really doing. And part of that is I've never really had, and I think you can attest from the times we've worked together, I haven't had a design organization or a research organization to support me. That being said, I don't think that that is a barrier to doing good design work and churning out good products. So one that really comes to mind for me is, you know, a lot of people have probably had experience in some way, shape, or form working with Salesforce.com and doing implementations and, you know, your classic out of the box software solution, right? But, you know, this was back many years ago now, and Salesforce was already installed. It was well ingrained with a field sales organization. But boy, I looked at it and I was appalled. It was like screens and screens of 6-point font of numbers and text in an organization that touted themselves on it. We're data driven. See, even our screens have nothing but data. Wonderful. So you're going to spend an hour trying to figure out what data you need as opposed to actually making it useful. And so what we ended up doing, and I actually was recruiting new product managers into the role and guided them on, okay, here's what you're going to do. You need to learn the business and you need to learn the role. So you're going to go shadow your users for 2 months. That's your job. Like, go on out in the field, go ride along, go figure out all the tools that they're using, not using, what their expectations are, and then come back to me and tell me what your ideas are. And so we had that conversation, and then we said, okay, we're going to go redesign this. And we did. And from including that 2 months that person took, 9 months later, we had completely redesigned that Salesforce platform. We'd upgraded from kind of the classic to the lightning and had more visuals. And, you know, in the meantime, we did all the things of having our focus groups and having effectively 2-week design cycle sprints with users for their feedback. And so they saw the progress that was being made. They saw a little vision of what could be possible, and it was so much different than what they'd seen in the past. So they, along the way, they became believers, and they were kind of, if you will, your champions in the field that got other people excited. So we didn't have to do all of that. At the end of it, we completely changed that, and it was a great result, because each of those 150 field sales agents were saving anywhere from an hour to 2 hours per day in doing data analysis, because now all they had to do was log in and the system actually told them everything that they needed without them having to go do all that analysis. And now they could spend that time going out and actually talking to customers.
So another question for you is that we've been talking a lot about, you know, how do we have designers reach out to business? You know, how can we educate business? What is your advice for business? How do you advise like PMs and POs and solution owners to actually kind of like reach out the other way, kind of like do not be afraid of design, go to them. What is your advice to business people?
Yeah, so I think part of it, I would say, is design resources should be your center of excellence for understanding, hey, do I have my user right? Like, here's who I think my customer is. Do I have that right? Am I focusing on the right characteristics of them? anything to start the conversation, right? And then I think the second piece is don't be afraid to actually talk about your end results, the business results you're after. But the reality is when you talk to design, they're usually going to talk more around a very long list of, it can feel like it's 3 or 4 or 5 steps removed before you get to the result. And I think that's the challenge. So while yes, business should go ask those questions of design, back to the design's got to always keep in mind, like they've got short attention spans. And yeah, I get it's 3, 4, 5 steps removed, but you got to be able to keep them engaged and understand those linkages.
Great advice. Brian, do you have one example to provide that worked very well for your team?
So there was a UNT project a couple of years ago. So it was for the spring semester. A company came to us and it was taking them to what was it? I think it was close to 18 months to do a migration. And they wanted us to do a little bit of research. So we did some stakeholder interviews, some stakeholder mapping, a service blueprint, and it became painfully obvious. There was like 3 key things that were the problem. And when we presented it to the company, they really weren't surprised. They kind of knew these things. They just didn't have an action plan. So we provided them with an action plan and a roadmap. I checked back with them this year, and instead of it now taking 18 months, it was reduced to about 9 months, so almost half. So that's like a really major success story on just ways in which putting on a service design thinking hat and giving them some of those key insights. It wasn't anything that surprised them. It was just, how do we take this information and then apply it to our company in a way that provides kind of a roadmap for us to implement quickly and provides impact. And anyway, to get that type of a reduction, it made things easier for everyone. And it had high impact to the customers. It's almost like printing money at that point too. So I would say that was the really big success story that we had. And it was really cool to lead a group of grad students through that and to see those type of results.
Very good. We are about 45 minutes in. I want to be respectful about this time over here. We have a significant amount of questions. So if it's okay, we're going to take a quick break here and take the first question from Robin.
Absolutely. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. Let me get back to where we were. And thank you all for submitting your questions. We've been archiving them in our Slack channel so that we can get to them in order. So the first question came from Lauren, actually very early on, even before Greg was finished introducing everyone. So we may have addressed some of this, but Lauren's question is very pointed towards design service blueprints. So when doing a service blueprint, what's a good approach to measuring duration versus effort? Would you measure both? How would you measure success for implementing ideas that may or may not actually reduce time? This is a very practical application of blueprinting question.
So maybe Jen, you're the best place to answer the question.
Sure. So if I understood it correctly, measuring duration versus time, is that essentially?
Yeah, and Lauren, if we want to have you come off mute to dive deeper into what you're really looking for in your answer, if I were to guess, it sounds a little bit like looking for balancing the impact of what you're discovering in the blueprint, whether it's better to save time or if it's an appropriate duration in what they're measuring.
She's saying duration versus effort.
Okay. So like duration of the project versus the effort to put into the project. Got it. Thank you for clarifying. I think that goes back to some of what we were talking about around making those decisions with our stakeholders, right? So as you go through the process, there are a lot of decisions to be made. And so understanding what those trade-offs might be if you shorten the duration, will it be as good of a design? Will it be as good of an output? Will it solve for the problems of the customers that we're here to represent and make their experiences better? We can do things quickly. It may not be done well, right? Or if it's we need something out there quickly, MVP, and I'll point to COVID. We can all probably point to COVID, but early COVID at Chick-fil-A, everything was get it out quickly. We need to keep the restaurants open. We need to keep serving food. And we need to keep doing it with a smile, even if it's behind a mask, right? And so in that respect, you know what? Duct tape might have been okay. I'll tell you, in no other situation would duct tape have been okay, but we were able to really balance out that duration, the time that we would take into the project versus the impact that we needed to make. Does that help answer the question?
Yeah, I think that Lauren was mentioning like duration is like it takes 2 weeks for the task to be done, and the effort is it takes 16 hours of work. I think she was saying like more in terms of design, the duration of the task versus the amount of effort taken to make a task. But I think we're good.
Ryan looks like he's raising his hand to add to that.
Yeah, I think part of what people need is they think that some of this work can take a long time, and they just need reassurances that, hey, the effort to do this, it's really not taking away from people's job. It's making them better. The duration might be 2 weeks or 3 weeks. The actual effort in a workshop or in a session doing an activity, it's really only a couple of hours, but the impact is worth it. So I think it's really about reassurances. That's how I would answer that question.
Thank you, Brian. Brandon, do you have a question?
I do. This one comes from, apologies about name pronunciation. I think it's Anna Kira Bex. They ask, with the impact cost matrix, how can you define impact and compare it? So this is for the panel at large. How can you define impact and compare it?
So I think this goes back, because I'm the one who brought up that matrix, so I'll start us off. It goes back to defining what your KPIs are early on. So what are your key performance indicators? What are you trying to achieve? And that may be driven, again, depending on who's in the room, but should be driven by end user needs, business needs, right? And so to measure and to compare the impact, thinking of those variables that you're going after to solve. And so it may be a combination of those. In some cases, it may be relatively subjective. In other cases, it may be that you have the research to support it already from some early concepting or just that initial upfront quant research that can tell you that, hey, this type of solution, a technical solution versus a hands-on service only human solution, is going to have a higher impact with our customer than the other, or vice versa. And so really it goes back to really knowing your end user to help understand which of those variables and solutions will have the highest impact.
Okay. Vinay, do you want to add to this or move to the next question?
I think the key thing that I want to highlight from what Jennifer just said is what you're working on better align to the business strategies, right? If all you're trying to do is put improvement efforts for the sake of improvements that you see are possible, but they don't align to what the business is trying to achieve, that's where you're going to end up feeling like you're not being supported and getting pushed back.
Okay, very good. Robin, next question.
Yeah, I've got a question here for Vinay. When you don't have a lot of design resources, and you had mentioned being resource constrained, which I think we're all familiar with. But the company has a lot of people moving on a lot of worthy initiatives. How do you pick your pitch or prioritize?
Well, how you prioritize is no different, whether you're prioritizing your business initiatives or your design or your research, right? It's what are the outcomes that you're trying to deliver, and which activities do you believe are most likely to deliver it, right? So whether you have design resources or not, and if you were to ask any of my teams that have worked for me either today or in the past where we don't have necessarily the level of design support, I don't shy away from expecting them to do the research, right? If the answer is for us to get to a certain outcome, I need to know what my customers want or expect, then whether it's my product managers, project managers, engineers, whoever, they need to go ask that question and of those people and be willing to engage, because otherwise, whatever they turn out, it's likely to be wrong. And ultimately, it's a waste of resource.
Brandon, do you have a question for Brian?
I do. This comes from Purva. Purva says, Brian, can you give an example of the who, what, wow statement, please?
Sure. So there's one from American history. It comes from President Kennedy. It's called the moonshot. And his who, what, wow statement was, I believe that we can send an astronaut to the moon and safely return them to Earth. So for many years, we could get someone to the moon. The wow was getting them back to Earth safely, right? So that's a wow statement. Another example of a who, what, wow statement might be a little bit more relevant to the software industry. An app developer should be able to find and download an API in less than 15 minutes. So again, you're having that business metric that we're all talking about. The who in this situation is the app developer. The what is find and download an API that they want. The wow is in less than 15 minutes. And you really have to understand what is that main goal and what is that main metric. And if you can do that, that's awesome, because then you have your talking point. Again, you have your pain point in your journey map or your service blueprint. The who, what, wow statement gives you a talking point. And then if you build user stories around that, those become your proof points. That's it.
Very good. Who's next? Robin, do you have a question for Vinay or Jen, maybe?
I do. I think this one will be a good one. It's another one from Lauren, and this one is around transitioning from service design tools like blueprints into actual tactical execution plans. And Lauren's asking, sometimes teams struggle to create an action plan to implement their ideas, even though the ideas are prioritized. Do you have any recommendations? So this is looking for more of, is there a tool, is there a process that you would use to turn those into actual things?
Jen?
Yeah, this is for the whole panel, by the way.
I saw Brian nodding his head very enthusiastically, so I thought he was going to dive in.
Brian, go for it.
So yeah, a couple of tools that you can use. Again, we had mentioned before, thinking about timeline, that's one, but thinking about investment. And a lot of times if you get with your product manager and something that's transformative might take a little bit more time, they're going to then start to think about time and money, as well as impact. So that can just be done in short-term, mid-term, long-term, and then getting those quick wins under your belt, usually at no cost or low cost or no cost. The other tool comes from MIT Sloan. So there's an article called Kill It, Bill It, or Keep It Free. And so whatever the service is that you're changing, should you keep it free? Should you kill it? Should you charge for it? So bill it. Is there a way maybe that a third party might do that work for you? So maybe it's not in your company's wheelhouse. So do you have a partner that can do it. So those are just ways that as you start to think through, okay, the services that you provide, you can look at MIT Sloan, kill it, bill it, keep it free. And then also think about investments and time, especially when it comes to implementation for any type of transformation project. It's going to take time because you're transforming the business.
Yeah, if I just add on to that, like the practical way I view it, and the power of, in my mind, a service blueprint is it ties together not only the technology and tools part, but also a lot of the manual processes and the wait time. So when you're really looking at all of your opportunity areas in a service blueprint, it gives you the opportunity to say, hey, what are my low-hanging fruit? You know, what can I go tackle pretty quickly with little resource investment to see if this works? And if we're improving in that area, guess what that does? It gives you some quick wins, but it also gains confidence in, you know, as long as you tout, where did you get that idea? Well, we got it from our service blueprint. We had this as a tool to analyze and validate, and you know what, we chose this because if we fix this, then all of these other downstream processes will improve on their own without us having it, right? So it's all of those kinds of things that if you can be smart about doing things quickly and not just the things that take time and effort to take through development.
So we need to build on that. What is your feeling around quick wins or low-hanging fruits? You know, those comes around all the time. There is some frustration either for business or for design, right? So how do you feel about those? Are those good things or bad things? Or are they dangerous?
I would say they probably don't exist in practice nearly as often as they are mentioned in conversation. So there probably isn't as many. But relatively speaking, the goal is, you know, in a lot of these things, I'll say the goal is to build confidence and trust, right? Early on, if, you know, I'm going under the assumption that a lot of these questions that we're fielding, it really boils down to the fact that there isn't a lot of inbound trust between, call it, business and design today. If that's the case, what qualifies in my mind as low-hanging fruit is what's going to prove out something as a positive outcome, short amount of time and resource investment, and build that trust to then carry on and go to bigger and more impactful areas.
So we're almost out of time. Before we get the last question, I want to give all three of you a chance to have a closing statement, so to speak, if I have one more question. So Jen, what would be your one recommendation you have to have designers working better with business? And also, what is your advice to business to work better with designers?
I think it goes back to kind of where I started, of really being open and listening to understand where our partners are coming from. And I'd say both for designers and for business partners, to understand what their goals are, what they're being asked to achieve, right? While we all may sit under the same business roof, we all have different metrics, we all have different goals, and trying to understand what's driving your partners to ask you to do this in this time frame at this cost, and trying to get there together, bringing them along that journey. But really that idea of openly listening and not telling, I think is probably the most successful way to get there, to create that trust and strong partnership.
Very good. Vinay, do you agree, disagree, have something to add to Jennifer's statement?
No, I definitely agree. And I think one of the things that shows and a way to build that trust and knowing that you're focused on the same outcomes is almost, hey, if I have a design partner and we're looking for a certain outcome, what speaks volumes is when they say, hey, like, ideally I would do XYZ, but understanding the constraints that we're working towards, this might be a little overkill and let's go with ABC instead. Then if that works, we can come back and modify it and shore it up with additional research or additional effort in this area. So all of those kinds of things that show that you're understanding, where the trade-offs need to be, and you're understanding and you're able to flex your ability and bring that expertise to bear and get the 80-20 rule kind of thing. I think that speaks volumes.
Okay. Brian, same question. I'm going to add a layer of difficulty for you. When you have a point of disagreement with business, when you know, or you have a hint that no, business is wrong, right? Whatever, I'm not going to judge here, but it's like when you really feel that the data isn't showing this, that you don't have the right insight, and yes, business insists on doing X, how do you handle that relationship to actually either you basically say, okay, fine, let's do X and we're going to measure it and we're going to show you it failed, or you actually kind of like, you know what, do you actually negotiate with them?
Great question. Wow. I was so totally prepared to answer the other one. So way to throw that curveball there. We don't have all the answers, right? We have opinions, right? And so what we're getting to here, Greg, I think, is I call it the fog factor. FOG is an acronym, fog factor. Facts, opinions, and guesses, right? We really don't have facts. We might have a guess that we haven't proven out. We might have a very strong opinion based upon our own experience, our own background. We really don't have the fact. We haven't put it in front of someone. We haven't really tested it out. And it's okay to iterate, right? It's okay to try something out, get some more information. If we can't have that trust, respect, and honesty that we've been talking about, it has to be mutual. So I have to be able to trust, respect, and be honest with that person. And we have to have a psychologically safe environment in order to do that. So I'll probably end this question by a quote from the great philosopher Ted Lasso: be curious, not judgmental. So I would just say, be curious. We can try this out. Let's see how it plays out. And I would negotiate with, hey, we can try this out and we can iterate on this here in a month or so. Let's see how it goes. I'm not always right, and quite frequently I'm wrong. And if I see two designers arguing, I'm going to say, let's run a usability test, right? So I do think we have to have that mutual trust, mutual respect, and mutual honesty. It has to be mutual, and we have to have that psychologically safe environment in order to build that. So I think that's how I would answer your curveball question at me. So thank you, sir.
So answer the first question now.
Oh, answer. Oh my God. So can you repeat the first question so I can now remember it?
The first question was like, what is your advice to designers to have a better relationship with business, and for business, a better relationship with design?
I think it goes to, it's really more about, and I think Jennifer had said it, it's more about mindsets than tool sets, right? We tend to, as designers and researchers, fall back on our tools and our methods and stuff. But I think if we have more of an open mindset and we're curious about what's driving our stakeholders, that's really important. And we talk a lot about user empathy, but sometimes we forget about stakeholder empathy. They're under a lot of pressure to deliver. And the thing that I tend to push for more than anything would be meaningful insights and differentiation. Start with why is one of the quotes. Yeah, start with why from Simon Sinek. Wonderful book. It's kind of hard to sometimes put that in practice because there's a lot of pressure with everyone. But that's what I think. If designers can have an open mindset and listen and be curious, not judgmental. Same thing with the business. Understand that design is here to help. In fact, I tend to have more of a therapist type mindset. Tell me where it's hurt, I can make it better. So yeah, the coaching mindset. Anyway, that's how I would answer the first question.
Good, thank you. Brandon, I think we have one more question. Is Jen, Vinay, Brian, are you okay? One more question?
Yeah, I'm cool. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. One last question here from the panel. We weren't able to get to all of them. There were some really great questions, and we had to edit, as it were. So thank you for your time. This one comes from Mo. Mo asks the panel at large, what advice would you give to agile product-led orgs that are outcome-focused and shipping constantly? Meaning, what strategies have you used to encourage people to slow down to see the broader multi-actor workflows and higher level UX? How do you get the business to say, slow down, stop the presses, as it were?
I guess, Vinay, you want to take that one?
So let me, I question if they're really being product led, if they're moving so fast that they don't know what the long-term plan is, right? Feels very much, I'll call it the kind of, at one point in my time, I was going through this exercise with a product team that was working Kanban, because they felt like that was the way to ensure they were working on the highest priority items every day. The problem is those things changed every day to every week, which makes it very difficult to actually define and deliver on larger, impactful, strategic pieces of work, right? So yes, you should be delivering constantly. That's kind of the whole point of Agile, but the trick is, are you able to, usually the problem is I have this big, hairy goal that I want to get to, and it's hard for me to break it down into small enough pieces to know what to deliver now. Feels like this is the other way around. You've broken everything out into small little pieces, and you're kind of losing the forest for the trees. You're so caught up in the detail that you're forgetting to step back and say, are all of these individual releases and improvements, are they really getting us to where we want to go 6 months from now, right? So that's all I would say is, hey, take a step back and do a little review and say, are all of these pieces adding up to kind of the long-term objectives that we have?
Yeah, I want to stress that Vinay is definitely a design-friendly product owner. We don't get the same answer from everybody. So Jen, do you have an opinion around being agile-led design, which we know is very difficult for designers to think in terms of those micro incremental pieces, but how do you handle that?
Yeah, I mean, I think building on what Vinay said, not be afraid to ask those tough questions, to be honest. So if you're starting to question, are these incremental changes leading us to this long transformational goal or not? Start asking the team, bring that up. What's the why? What are these individual components driving us toward? And make it part of the process to go back and connect and step back and make sure that you are seeing the big picture and not getting too caught into those short agile sprints. Now, as the one who often asks some of those sticky questions, you're not always going to be the most popular person in the room, and just have to be okay with that. And making sure you're asking it respectfully with an open mind, asking it with curiosity, right, and not with judgment. And there, even if you think you know the answer, still ask it and get people to think about it too. And as soon as you ask it, hopefully your partners are curious enough to start to want to answer that question, not just jump to the default, yep, we're good, we've got it. It's more, hey, why do we think we have it? Why do we think we're still moving to the right direction? Where might there be gaps? With the new information that we have, how might that have changed what we're doing? And do we need to come back and reflect and maybe, pivot a little bit? But we're designers. Be comfortable with the uncomfortable. And sometimes that is asking those really hairy questions that no one wants to hear.
Very, very good answer. Brian, you may actually have the last word.
So on that particular question, I think I would agree with both folks on the panel. The approach that I would do is I would upsell everything. So it's fantastic that we're doing continuous improvement. We should do that. What else can we do before continuous improvement? Could we do some additional research? Could we, what's great, what comes before that? Could we have a safe place where we could do rapid experimentation in a safe environment? So if we're doing continuous improvement, why don't we run rapid experiments so that we know that what we're bringing to the marketplace, instead of just delivering a bunch of stuff quickly, we're delivering stuff of value because we're performing rapid experiments. I would upsell all along the spectrum rather than just doing a usability test or something at the end. Well, what would come before a usability test, right? Could we do a rapid iterative testing evaluation? Well, what comes before that? Could we do some type of design thinking? Well, what's before that? Well, we're looking at the marketplace, maybe using some of those foresight methods that you were talking about earlier, Greg. What if we had a safe environment where we could do that? And then it's all along the entire spectrum, the innovation spectrum, rather than just doing stuff at the end and doing things quickly where it's almost muscle memory. Is there a way to just be smarter all along the way? And I would upsell every part of the innovation spectrum. If we're getting wins here, wouldn't it be nice if we did something a little earlier? Great, we're now winning here. Wouldn't it be nice if we did something a little earlier? Great, we're winning here. Wouldn't it be nice if we're doing rapid experiments? So I would upsell all along the way. That's how I'd answer that question, sir.
Very good. I believe we're way over time now, so I want to, there's more questions, but we're going to have to wrap this up. So I want to thank you very much, Jen, Vinay, Brian, thank you so much for being part of this panel. I know this was kind of like this kind of like, elephant in the room kind of subject that nobody wants to be discussing. We don't want to talk about business and so on and so forth. But I hope this is actually an open conversation for us to have with our business partners, and they are our partners. We definitely cannot do anything about them. So we have to be respectful of their needs, understand their needs. We claim to have a lot of empathy as designers, but we show very little empathy towards our business partners. I think it's a shame. We definitely think about them as users as well, as not just stakeholders and people to get stuff from. So thank you so much, all three of you, for sharing your insight, experience, and knowledge. I really appreciate you being very candid and open about your personal relationship with designers and business. It's always very nice to see all three of you. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who's been patient with their questions. And thank you to Robin and Brandon as well. And we hope to see you at the next session. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. All right, everybody have a wonderful day. See you next month. Bye.